Blizzard just banned Sigma, Roadhog, Brig, and Doomfist. This unprecedented 2-tank bans, coupled with Brig, have immense implications for the composition and characters that you should start playing if you want to get SR this week. In fact, I'm going to reveal to you the best tanks and supports, break down the winners and losers of each one, and tell you the triple S tier DPS that you have to be playing if you want to win each and every game. All that being said, let's jump right into the winners and losers for this competitive week. Now, first we got to get started on what defines the meta, which is the tanks. Let's talk about the winners and losers of tanks so you get a better idea of what you need to play. Firstly, Sigma and Roadhog got banned, and there's not that many tanks to choose from, so this really narrows down the potential compositions that you could play. There are going to be two predominant team comps going forward: dive-based comps and comps built around Ryan. Firstly, let's talk about the winners. The two huge winners right now is Ryan and Winston. Ryan is going to be incredibly powerful, of course. He brings a lot of value to the table. His aggressive playstyle coupled with his partner Zarya or even a diva can allow him to take space aggressively. He allows a lot of different DPS to shine, such as Mei, McCree, or even Hanzo. Ryan-based comps is going to be one of the central points for this week. That being said, in my opinion, the biggest winner is Winston-based dive comps. Dive is going to be immensely powerful this week for a number of reasons. The biggest reason is the fact that Brig is off the table. Brig was literally a character designed to shut dive down, and she's gone. On top of that, Roadhog was also pretty good at dive. Dive is going to be probably the best composition. That being said, for your average game, players don't really play dive very well. It's hard to coordinate dive in Grandmaster, much less in Gold. Dive is going to be very tricky, and for the majority of players, a Ryan-based comp is going to be the easiest to run and easiest to play. Now, moving on to characters that are still good, we have D.Va and Hammond. Both these characters are good. D.Va can be played in both dive or with a Ryan to provide extra utility. Hammond, on the other hand, is the wild card, kind of based on your ability with the character. He can be slotted in with a Ryan, he can be slotted in with a Winston. There's a lot of different uses for Hammonds, but the overall 4 combos that I would say is there's a Ryan Zarya combo, which gives you the most pound for pound, brawly, sustained fight, raw damage. There's Ryan D.Va that adds an extra layer of contestability against DPS on the high ground, things like Hanzo and McCree. Then there's Monkey D.Va, which is going to be the de facto best dive composition, but there's going to be alterations where Hammond fits in with almost every single composition, but he has to be bringing a certain level of utility to the table. It's going to really depend on your individual skill level on Hammond. So now that you know that there's two compositions that you should really be playing, a dive composition or a Ryan-based composition, let's talk about the biggest loser for this meta patch, and it's Orisa. The fact of the matter is, Orisa lost both Sigma and Roadhog, which are her two best combos. Double Shield Sigma, or having the ability to be able to pull, hook consistently, those two things are going to be off the table, and she doesn't really pair well with any other tank on the roster. I mean, you can hypothetically play Orisa with like D.Va or even Ryan to try to do an emulation double shield, but she's not going to bring that much utility to the table, and in my opinion, there's much more powerful things you could be running. In general, I think Orisa is a character that you want to stay away from this week. You have other better options in Ryan or even a dive composition. I would avoid this hero altogether. And then we can't fail to mention the true losers of this week. It's the DPS players that wanted faster Qs and then just Q as tank and insta-lock hog. Yeah, I feel really bad for you. Not really. Anyways, I know you guys got some extra time on your hands and hopefully plenty of toilet paper. Let's use this time to get you closer and closer to Grandmaster. The GameLeap website is 50% off and the link is down below. We're pushing out loads of content every single day to keep your skills engaged and your SR always increasing. Go ahead, click the link and access your true potential. So now we're ending the category that I'm sure you all want to know about, the DPS. Let's talk about the winners and losers so you get a better idea of what DPS you need to play right now. So there are actually 3 big winners right now, and it's Tracer, Soldier 76, and Reaper. There's different reasons that all 3 of these characters are big winners, but the big takeaway is all these characters can be played in both Ryan comps or dive comps. They're incredibly versatile. Reaper can be played with a Ryan and a Lucio and a Mora and just go in and brawl the enemy. He's incredibly difficult to dive. He can also be played in with a dive and help dive tanks burst them down. Incredibly versatile, the same way Soldier can play in both those type of compositions, and the same way that Tracer can be played in any type of composition. Tracer is the biggest winner in this meta, but I'm going to break down exactly what you need to do in a second after I get through with the still good and the losers. So now let's talk about the characters that are still good right now. And the still good characters are Widow, Hanzo, McCree, Mei, characters like that. They are incredibly good, but you got to understand that they're not applicable in every single composition. Widow and Hanzo are going to take a little bit of a hit if people start playing dive. But like I said, dive is going to be hard to play in ranked. Ryan's probably going to be played more, even if dive is much better. So these characters are going to be good, but you got to keep in mind that they're not necessarily going to be the most powerful. And they definitely have counterplay to them, making them not always the best depending on the composition you're playing against. Now let's talk about the big losers here, and it's just Ashe, Junkrat, Pharah. Characters like these are incredibly susceptible to dive. There's not going to be extended shield break here, and pocketing in general isn't going to be that powerful in my opinion. We're going to talk about that in a second, but I don't think pocketing is really where you want to be right now. There's going to be a lot of different proactive plays made by the tanks right now. You definitely don't really want to just pocket an Ashe and try to enable her instead of enabling your tanks. That being said, even though these characters are losers, let's talk about a big takeaway here. Most of the DPS are playable right now. As long as you pair a DPS with the appropriate comp, you're gonna have a good time. I wouldn't suggest, if your team is full dive, for you to be playing a McCree or a Mei. You want to be playing something that really goes with your composition. You could even play characters like Genji and Sombra, characters that are dive oriented. They're very powerful if you pair them with the appropriate comp. You could play Genji if you have an Ana, a Nanoblade, and you're diving fully. Genji's all of a sudden a really good pick, but you don't necessarily want to be playing him against a regular Rhine composition. There's other better DPS that you could pick if you're playing that sort of composition. So understanding what characters to pick with your composition is really important right now. And then, like I said before, Soldier and Reaper are two examples of DPS that are really good in any sort of composition. Those are the two that I would suggest you play right now, besides the triple S tier pick right now, which is undoubtedly Tracer. Tracer is so good right now for a lot of reasons, but the biggest reason is there is no Brig. Brig is the end-all be-all for Tracer. She is the hardest counter. Armor is a huge counter to Tracer. I can't tell you how many times I was playing Tracer through any rank, Masters, Grandmaster, play Tracer in literally any rank, and if I farm the enemy support one time, if I make one good play or do one thing, anything that accomplishes any sort of value, the enemy's going to swap to Brig, and then all of a sudden I'm going to have way less value. They can't do that anymore, and before Brig came out, Tracer was actually unstoppable. She was the best DPS pick by far, and in my opinion, it's that way again. Tracer is S tier. She's applicable in every single composition, in every single map, in every single situation. Tracer is the undoubted best DPS going forward. If you're a good Tracer player, you need to be playing her right now. But here's the caveat. Tracer is not easy to play. She's definitely not. And if you're not mechanically honed enough to take down Hanzos and McCrees and duel them, or you're not mechanically honed enough to duel Anas or do things like that, you're not going to have the value that Tracer can bring to the table, just like it was before. See, as for before, it doesn't really matter how good you were on Tracer. There was a limit to what you could bring to the table when there was Briggs all around and lots of different counters. But now that Briggs off the table, if you are insanely good at Tracer, you could hard carry tons and tons of games. I would definitely suggest you pick up her while she's in God status for this week. It's going to be a lot of fun for you Tracer players. Now, moving on, we definitely have to talk about the supports, because I know a lot of you are kind of hesitant about what supports to pick, what's the good supports right now. I'm going to tell you, break it down for you. So, the big thing that you need to understand is Brig is banned. That's going to mean that if you're being dove, you're not going to have as much capability to swap to something that can peel for yourself. You're not going to have that same level of utility. Luckily for you, because Doomfist is banned, you're not going to get completely farmed by Doom every single game, which I know a lot of you support players really didn't like, and especially if you didn't have Brig and Doom was still on the table, it would be a nightmare. Now, this being said, you're going to be facing a lot of different divers. You're going to be facing dive compositions in general. You're going to be facing Tracers. You're going to be facing Genjis. Keep in mind, as support, you're going to be the target of a lot of people's dives. That's a really important thing. So let's talk about the winners. The big two winners, in my opinion, are Lucio and Ana. Now, you might be thinking, why is Ana a bigger winner than Mora? But Mora is still good. I'm going to get to that in a second. I think she's still very good, but Ana can still bring more to the table. I'm talking about peaks here, and Ana brings so much. She can enable a Rhine comp. She can enable a dive comp. She's really good at tons of tanks and DPS. She brings burst damage. She has so much utility. Ana's just probably going to be one of the de facto best main supports going forward. I would definitely suggest you playing Ana if you're an Ana main, but there are other things that you could play if you're not as confident in Ana. Like I said, you're going to be target of a lot of dives. Another winner is Lucio. Lucio is going to be the best peeler now that Briggs off the table. You need someone who could peel for your allies, help them out. He's really good in dive with speed boost. He's really good with Rhine and speed boosting you in, your McCree into position, things like that. And he's very good at peeling. Lucio is probably just triple S tier support right now as well. He usually is, but he's even better right now than normal because there's not that many other options. The utility that Brig brought to the table sometimes counter Wade, speed boost in certain situations, but now nothing does. In my opinion, you should just be playing Lucio in almost every team comp. He's extremely good. Now let's talk about some supports that are still good. Mora is still good. She's good against dive because she has fade. She's good with Rhine brawling because she can enable him. That being said, in my opinion, Mora isn't the best character to play with dive. You definitely don't want to have to use your fade to keep up with your mobile tanks and DPS to keep them sustained because it leaves you susceptible. I don't think that Mora brings enough value to the table necessarily, and her utility isn't as good as something like Ana. So I think Mora is good. She's definitely really good with Rhine, but I don't know if she is the best in general overall because she's not really good in dive in general. And you got to be really careful when you play Mora. Don't let your Mora orbs get eaten by a diva, please. Don't let it happen. And then we got to talk about a still good Baptiste. I think Baptiste is really good. He's good against dive. He's going to be one of the big counters against dive. If you're playing a really bunker heavy comp with something like Baptiste, Lucio, or even something like Baptiste Ana, some type of really slow sustained composition, if you wanted to really bunker up, protect yourself against the dives, play something like a Mei. Baptiste Mei together definitely give you a lot of sustainability against dive. That being said, you're going to need really tight immortality field use if you want to sustain the onslaught from a dive. So Baptiste is going to be good, but it's also going to be depending on your skill level as per usual with a lot of these different characters. Now let's talk about the two losers, and keep in mind that these aren't insane losers. They're kind of like slight losers. I'm not going to say that they are unplayable because they're not. They're actually really good in the right situation. But in general, these supports aren't going to give you the most amount of value inherently. Zen and Mercy are my two big losers, and they're my losers for a number of reasons. The biggest reason for Zen in particular is dive is on the table, and as Zen, you're just going to get dove. You're going to get dove over and over again, and it's going to be incredibly annoying. While at the same time you enable a dive, I don't think you enable a dive as good as Lucio. That being said, there could be situations where you're playing Lucio with Zen, but I still think that you're not going to have that much sustain. I don't really know if that's enough, unless maybe you're playing a Hammond-based composition where Hammond needs very little heals. Maybe a Hammond soldier composition where both of those characters are self-sustaining. You don't need to heal people as much, but at the end of the day, I really think Zen isn't that going to be played that often. And definitely in a Rhine composition, you'll almost never play a Zenyatta because you want Lucio. Lucio's just better. Speed boost is really necessary. I don't think you want to be playing Zen that much. And then Mercy in general, I don't think pocketing is that good. I think that if you're pocketing, you can't pocket in a Rhine composition because you always need that Lucio. Lucio's S tier, like we talked about before. And what are you going to be doing? Giving up Ana or Mora or Baptiste for a Mercy? Sure, you could provide some sort of damage boost or something like that, but Mercy, Lucio alone isn't going to be good enough to sustain a Rhine Zarya-based composition. It might be good enough to sustain something like Dive, and maybe that's decent enough, but in my opinion, you can bring more to the table with something like Ana. I think Mercy's decent. If you're a really good Mercy, you mastered your super jumps, and you understand exactly how to move the character around, and you have a good DPS that you can enable, you could be fine. But I think that it's just going to be better in general to be playing Ana instead of Mercy, or even Baptiste or Mora in the appropriate team compositions. So the really big thing that you need to take away from this week is that Dive is incredibly strong, most likely the best composition, but it's going to be hard for people to play it in ranked. So most people are probably going to resort to a Rhine Zarya sort of composition, which doesn't change much from about 2 weeks ago when Orisa was banned. So a lot of the good DPSs that you're used to playing will still be good, but Dive brings another leg to the table. And definitely for you DPS players, you definitely need to be playing Tracer. So, and for the final takeaway for everybody is you really want to be playing the characters that fit the composition. If the tanks are Dive, you need to be playing supports that enable Dive and help enable Dive, and you need to be playing DPS that fit your composition. Like I said, you don't really want to be playing something like McCree with a Dive composition, or necessarily something like Genji with a Rhine composition. Really keep this in mind going forward, and you will be well off this competitive week. Although if you need to master our big winners for this week, Tracer, Soldier, Reaper, Lucio, on it, the GameLeap website is 50% off, and the link is down below. We're pushing out loads of content every single day to keep your skills engaged and your SR always increasing. Go ahead, click the link, and access your true potential. Anyways, that's all I have for you today. Any questions about what's good, what's bad? I know I didn't include every single thing in the video, but I can't really include that in this little guide. But if you have any questions, I will be answering to every single one you may have. That's all I have for you today. I'm Coach Mills, and until next time,